Welcome. My name is Brian, and tonight's night 7 of our 24 nights of live streams, breaking down how the American people can have a better political structure in the United States. And it revolves around unionizing as voters and creating a shared vision for what the United States can become. And that vision comes from the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. So every night we start off by reciting the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Welcome everybody again tonight. Tonight we're going to be continuing our look at under the Established Justice title of the legislative package, getting even more into the criminal justice reform, including ending the federal war on drugs. You'll notice that our 3 planks: ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, ending the endless wars. The endless wars, right? Most Americans, myself included, we can't remember a time when we weren't fighting the war on drugs. It's been more than 50 years. It's clear that the strategy of trying to cut off the supply of drugs is not working. Let's see, I got a slide here. According to a 2021 survey of American voters, 83% say the war on drugs has failed. 65% support ending it. 64% support repealing mandatory minimums for drug crimes, and 61% support commuting or reducing the sentences of people incarcerated for drugs. We can do that. These are policies that Congress has set, and Congress can update the policies that make the United States run the way that it does. And so that is what the Trump-Biden peace plan, the American Union's legislative package for the 2024 election, does, and which we're going to dig into in just another minute here. If you got questions, go ahead and post them in the chat of the live stream. But just to briefly recap, the American Union is not a third party, but a union of swing voters. As we've looked at in previous evenings, we've looked at how close the polls are, how close the presidential race is across half a dozen swing states where neither of the major party candidates manages to poll over 50%. A union of swing voters. Swing voter is someone who's willing to vote for both a Democrat and a Republican. A union of swing voters can use their leverage as the deciders in order to demand legislative action from Congress. And we can use this power not to seek office for ourselves. Again, the American Union is not a third party. We don't run candidates. Instead, as the deciders, we can be conscientious objectors to this polarizing game of politics. And instead of playing Republican versus Democrat and picking a side to fight against each other endlessly, instead, we can be the calmer heads that prevail. We offer Congress a choice. Congress, get this done before the election, and you can earn the American Union endorsement. We will let you keep your jobs. Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, as long as you get it done before the election. If you refuse, our support can go to your major party challenger. So instead of Republican versus Democrat, we can play incumbents versus challengers, offering a positive vision for America, end poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars, offering the voters of this country a positive vision to come together around meeting those 5 duties from the preamble that we just talked about: establishing justice, ensuring domestic tranquility, providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. The American Union can help the United States get back on track to doing that. And so Muster Day, October 15th, is the day that this comes to a head. Americans who are willing to come together and pool their votes for the American Union endorsed candidates are asked to participate in a 24-hour fast for peace. Fasting is an essential, is fasting and compromise, I like to say. Fasting and compromise are two sides of the same coin, willingly giving something up. I'm not going to get into all the details of how fasting serves as a hub for this model of 21st century collaborative democracy. But I have gotten into those details in my novel, Looking Backward from the Tricentennial, A Timely Tale of Nonviolent Revolution. Sorry, I guess I can't show the bottom of this very well. In this novel, an American gets bumped ahead to the year 2076, and they sit him down and explain how the American Union staged a nonviolent revolution in the present day using Dr. Martin Luther King's lessons, the principles of nonviolence, and game theory, incumbents versus challengers, to get leverage over Washington, D.C. And so tonight I would like to give away an autographed copy of this to one person. So here's the fine print. You need to live in the United States, and all you've got to do is go to our website, anamericanunion.com, and you just scroll down to the bottom, scroll down past the details of what's in the legislative package to sign up for the American Union newsletter. Fill out that form, and I'll get a notification email, and I will randomly select somebody who subscribes during tonight's live stream and contact you for a mailing address, and I'll mail you an autographed copy. Look, we can do this. We can end federal war on drugs, and we can do it by following the lessons of Martin Luther King. When he challenged us, he said, "Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal opposition to poverty, racism, and militarism. With this powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo." And you can see the three planks of the American Union address his triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism. Yeah. So ending mass incarceration. Ending mass incarceration. It's a moral stain on our nation. The fact that 2 million people are waking up behind bars every single day. That we have more people locked up in our country than any other nation on the planet, despite the fact we only have about 4% of the world's population. And it exposes the lie in the Pledge of Allegiance. We are not a nation with liberty and justice for all. Again, the mass incarceration, ending mass incarceration is one of the ways we can address the racism that Dr. King identified as one of our triple evils. And this is pretty widely recognized in America. There was a 2019, what are we doing here? There's a 2019, what the heck? Okay, let's try this again. This is widely recognized in America. There was a 2019 Pew Research study that found about 2/3 of Americans, 65%, say that blacks are treated less fairly than whites by the criminal justice system and in dealing with the police, so at 67%. This was even before George Floyd was murdered in the custody of the Minneapolis police, and people recognized it, that something had to be done, that things needed to change, that what we were doing was not, in fact, establishing justice like the Constitution directs us to. And so, I was one of the estimated 20 million people that came out of lockdown, came out of the pandemic quarantine to participate in these protests, the George Floyd protests. By some accounts, the largest mass movement in U.S. history. Let's see. All right. So in her best-selling book, 2010 book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness, Michelle Alexander broke out the racial injustice in the judicial system. After tracing it back through Reconstruction, through Richard Nixon's Southern Strategy, as well as detailing the social and economic costs, including the loss to everyone's liberty, some of the things that the policies we've talked about in previous evenings. Alexander threw down a challenge to reformers. And she wrote, if we become serious about dismantling the system of mass incarceration, we must end the war on drugs. There is no way around it. So if we want to end mass incarceration, again, this is one of our goals, you've got to end the war on drugs. The war on the drug war, it's a poison tree with roots deep in our criminal code. Its branches are interlaced with Supreme Court decisions depriving us of fundamental liberties. It is a tree whose leaves provide shade for police corruption, and a tree which tens of millions of Americans, disproportionately people of color, have tasted bitter fruit and been left hungry for justice. Americans are recognizing this, right? We have seen in my lifetime, in the last 10 years, we've seen marijuana legalization spread around the country. I don't know exactly how many states have legalized it or have medical marijuana, but marijuana is accessible in most U.S. states right now. So we've learned in the past, that alcohol prohibition did not work. We tried this 100 years ago. We tried alcohol prohibition, and it did not work as far as ending alcohol use. And just as importantly, it caused other problems. In trying to make alcohol illegal, prohibit the buying and selling and manufacturing of it, it gave rise to organized crime. People like Al Capone, who could make ridiculous amounts of money through the fact that you could not have legal competition to provide something that people wanted. So we can do the same thing that we did when we ended alcohol prohibition. We can push things back to the states, let the states decide whether or not they want to participate in legalizing drugs or if they want to keep it illegal. Again, we did this after alcohol prohibition. Kansas stayed dry until after World War II, and we left it up to the states. So we can do that same thing again. We're going to talk a little more about how. Just to clarify terminology, on the federal level, illegal drugs carry criminal penalties, which carry the possibility of jail time. That's why they are criminalized. You also have in some states drugs that have been decriminalized. That does not make them legal. John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction has a line. He says you can't just walk into a bar and start puffing away. Instead, what decriminalized means is that the punishment for possession is merely a fine, similar to a traffic ticket. And just because that it's not a criminal thing doesn't mean that you can't be arrested. The Supreme Court ruled in 2001 in Atwater versus the city of Lago Vista that even minor infractions such as not wearing a seatbelt could be an arrestable offense. But as a general rule, decriminalization doesn't lead to arrest, only confiscation and a fine. Now, legalization flips the equation around. So there's a presumption that drug possession or use is not a criminal matter. Now, one of the most deadliest drugs worldwide, as well as in the United States, is alcohol. And this is the way that we treat alcohol. There's a presumption that if you're in possession of alcohol, it's not a crime, subject to age restrictions. But in general, it's not a criminal matter. Now, alcohol causes, according to the CDC, claims 178,000 lives per year in the United States. And yet, it's legal in all 50 states for adults to use under circumstances as those states dictate. States set their own policy under this federal framework. And so when we talk about ending the federal war on drugs, it's not to say that drug use is harmless. Drug use is still harmful. Fatal drug overdoses, they used to hover around like 70,000 in like 2017, 18, 19. But then when the pandemic hit, they've been averaging over 100,000 American lives each year since then. And so between drugs and alcohol, we've got 250,000 deaths, and we need to find a better way to deal with this problem. And since many of those fatal drug overdoses come from the fact that people are buying something that they don't know what it is, they don't know the purity and the quality of the product, we can address that through taxation, regulation, and legalization. All right. That's the basic pitch. Let's get into the details. And this is continuing the Weldon Angelos Justice Prosecutorial Reform Act. And this is part 2, ending the federal drug war. And so we got our short title and our findings, which I'm just going to read here. Findings. The Congress finds the following. During the 50 years since Congress's enactment of the Controlled Substances Act, which authorized and launched the harsh drug war policies sought by the Nixon administration, the United States adopted increasingly punitive policies towards the possession, use, and distribution of drugs. The United States has built a massive regime to enforce those policies. 2. Congress and state legislatures have passed increasingly harsh sentencing schemes, such as mandatory minimums, established far-reaching and oppressive civil sanctions and collateral consequences, approved policies weakening the Fourth Amendment for drug searches and seizures, and fostered incentives for aggressive and militarized policing in the alleged pursuit of drugs. 3. Every year there are more than 1.4 million arrests in the United States for drug-related offenses. And over 85% of those arrests, more than 85%, drug possession was the most serious offense. Drug arrests disproportionately impact people of color and more commonly occur in historically overpoliced low-income communities. Criminal record, even for an arrest that did not result in conviction, has a profound impact on individuals, often interrupting employment, housing, family relationships, child custody, and education. 4. A health-based approach to drug use and overdose is more effective, humane, and cost-effective than criminal punishments. Subjecting people to criminal penalties, stigma, and other lasting collateral consequences because they use drugs is expensive, ruins lives, and can make access to treatment and recovery more difficult. 5. Despite high numbers of arrests and incarceration in the United States for drug possession, the rate and number of drug-involved overdose deaths has skyrocketed for over 20 years and continues at epidemic level. Since the pandemic, approximately 100,000 people have died each year. 6. Harm reduction services and voluntary on-demand access to evidence-based substance use disorder treatment have proven highly effective in reducing overdoses and the spread of communicable diseases like HIV and hepatitis C, preventing drug-related injury, and improving health outcomes for people who use drugs. These services should be available on demand to anyone who requests it. 7. Far too many people who desire treatment face challenges that prevent them from accessing the services that they want, including cost barriers, lack of providers, and long wait lists. On-demand access to evidence-based treatment saves lives, reduces crime, and saves money. 8. Criminalizing drug use and possession reduces the amount of resources available for harm reduction and treatment services and deters people from accessing available services due to fear of arrest. 9. Punitive policies have achieved no reduction in supplies or prices, but instead have created unnecessarily risky and harmful conditions for people who use drugs. Punitive policies have led to militarized tactics that thwart the spirit of the Constitution and have led to the deaths of innocent civilians. Additionally, the drug war apparatus has cost the federal government hundreds of billions of dollars in direct enforcement and incarceration costs. 11. While drug legalization cannot fully repair our broken and oppressive criminal justice system or the harms from the 50 years of the war on drugs, it will help restore individual liberty, protect against some police abuses, and better assist those in need and reduce spending. 12. In this moment, Congress recognizes that drug prohibition has failed just as alcohol prohibition did, and it is time to move the country in a new direction. Sense of Congress. It is the sense of Congress that incarcerating or otherwise subjecting an individual to criminal penalties solely for recreational drug use is not justice, which the preamble of the Constitution requires be established by the people of the United States. All right, that's section 141. 142 is, we're getting into ending the federal drug war. We're defining the term drug offense, and so let's go ahead and let's look at these slides real quick. All right, the Trump-Biden peace plan will wind down the federal war on drugs. Phase 1 is implemented on passage in 2024. First, we're about to read, we acknowledge the new policy, begin the process of opting out of United Nations treaties, decriminalize drugs on the federal level, and lift restrictions on access to the banking system. That is phase 1. Phase 2 is building a framework for regulation and taxation. So over the next year, through 2026, we'd establish the Drug War Restorative Justice Office. The Food and Drug Administration would issue rules around labeling, purity, those kinds of things. Expunge previous federal drug convictions and set up a system for reviewing the cases of those still serving their sentence. And then January 1, 2026, repeal the Controlled Substances Act, leaving states free to set their own policies, letting states opt in to a federal framework for legalization, taxation, and regulation. There should be a mention of a sales tax on here, but I'm not seeing it. All right, let's go back to section 142, ending the federal drug war. So here's the part where you're leaving the drug laws on the books, but sort of decriminalizing them. Notwithstanding any other provision in law, it is an affirmative defense to any federal drug offense that the drugs were intended for recreational use by a consumer. Nothing in the subsection may be construed as prohibiting charges for non-drug offenses incidental to the drugs in question. So, mere possession or other activity involving drugs, there would be an affirmative defense, which would come close to ending charges brought under the federal drug war. This would be effective immediately. Subsection C, repealing drug offenses, that like we said would be effective January 1, 2026. I'm just going to blast. Well, so if you check out the Trump-Biden peace plan, all of these things are clickable. You can see exactly what is being repealed. Some of it's just striking references to drug trafficking crimes, to illegal use of drugs, and in the burn grant program. We are amending what the grants can be used for. So it can be used for law enforcement programs, new language, except those targeting drug offenses. And it can still be used for drug treatment programs, but not enforcement programs. So if states want to keep the drug war illegal, that's fine, but they'd have to spend their own money on it and not burn grants. Okay, yeah, and so that subsection would be effective January 1, 2026. Those repeals, once they do take effect, they are retroactive and apply to any offense committed, case pending, conviction entered, or Same for juveniles, on or after the effective date. All right, section 144, banking not prohibited. One of the many examples of the, when we talked about civil asset forfeiture the other night, there was I forget what state it was, but as marijuana retailers collect large amounts of cash, there are some banks that will not allow them to use the banking system because they could potentially face sanctions from regulators because they're taking money from an illegal activity, which marijuana is illegal under federal law. So everybody knows this is a problem, and yet Congress refuses to act. Congress willfully just lets this problem continue to exist, and they won't do anything about it. So day one, October 31st, this problem would be solved. Banking would no longer be prohibited because these are the sections of law that relates to the possibility of sanctions, and then going through as well and amending the references to the Controlled Substances Act as things that banks shouldn't be doing. All right, seeing no questions in the chat, let's move on to section 145, imposing a sales tax. Again, drug use is not harmless, but the war on drugs causes far more harm. And so to address these harms that drug use does in fact cause, there is a 12% retail sales tax on drugs, on recreational drugs. As we get down, we'll see these are only on recreational intoxicating products, and that prescription drugs does not include any prescription drugs, medicine, or prescribed drugs. So medical is intended to be exempt. This tax likewise would go into effect January 1, 2026 at 12:01 a.m. All right, so that money that is collected from the sales tax, on recreational drug sales, half of it would go into the Treasury, into the general fund of the United States. The other half will go into the Opportunity Trust Fund. And we'll break down in a minute here what the Office of Drug War Restorative Justice will do. There we go. Section 146, Drug War Restorative Justice Office established. This would be a new office within the Office of Justice Programs, and the legislative package sets up how the office will be set up, employee and full-time employees, including legal counsel, and the duties and functions of the Drug War Restorative Justice Office would be to administer the Community Reinvestment Grant Program, which is to provide eligible entities with funds to 1. Administer services for individuals most adversely impacted by the war on drugs, including job training, reentry services, literacy programs, youth recreation or mentoring programs, and health education programs. So this would get 30% of the money that doesn't go to the Treasury. So 15% of the sales tax will go to this program, to this paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 is to administer substance use treatment services in a consistently effective manner for any individual who requests such services. This is not just to throw grant money at anybody who says, "Oh, give me grants, I'll treat drugs." They have to demonstrate a consistently effective manner. in order to be eligible for these grants, so that they can provide services to anyone who wants treatment for substance use, substance abuse, addiction, any of these kinds of things. Again, drug use is not harmless, but let's tax the recreational sales and use that money to fund treatment services. And this would be 1/4 of the revenue collected, 50% of the money that goes to the office. And last, administering legal aid for civilian and criminal drug offenses, including expungement of drugs convictions. And this gets the last 20% of the revenue, 10% of the sales tax will go to this one. The director is also able to make recommendations from time to time for rebalancing the percentages. But to start, that's where they start at, is that 15%, 25%, and 10% of the sales tax revenue. The office would also be responsible for submitting to Congress a proposed draft of legislation that would implement such technical and conforming amendments that would further clarify and implement the provisions of this section. So that's what the Drug War Restorative Justice Office would do. Giving out grants to help remediate harms that the drug war has caused. Yeah, okay. Let's see. 147, just basic rulemaking authority within 1 year. Department of Treasury shall issue or amend any rules. And similarly, the Food and Drug Administration shall issue rules and standards for quality, purity, and labeling of recreational intoxicating products, which are offered for sale in the United States. Let's see. All right, section 148, expungement. The term expunge means to remove the record of such arrest from the official record. And this would be automatic within 1 year of enactment of the Trump-Biden peace plan. Each federal district court shall review their records and issue an order expunging each conviction for a drug offense, as well as any arrests. So arrests and convictions. They're supposed to notify individuals when they have been expunged. Anything after any sentences that are not complete by enactment of the Trump-Biden peace plan, you can petition the court for expungement. It's only automatic if you get it done if the sentence is already complete. And okay. All right, the effective expungement, any individual who's had an arrest, conviction, or juvenile delinquency adjudication expunged under the section 1 may treat the arrest, conviction, or adjudication as if it never occurred and shall be immune from any civil or criminal penalties related to perjury, false swearing, or false statements. So you can legally say that you have that this arrest never happened. Would not be perjury to say that it did not happen. All right, let's see. Let's see if we got any other questions here. All right. Last, there are certain UN drug laws that sort of enmesh us in the war on drugs, and we can opt out of those. Some of which we co-authored, some of which we helped write. Were written in New York. And you can see by the dates on these: the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances, and the 1988 Convention against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances. We can opt out of these. That's what denouncing means. So we can denounce these. There's relevant paragraphs relevant articles in each of these treaties. The deal is that we have to give 1 year's notice that we're going to do so. And so the president would be required by the end of this year to give such notice and make the withdrawal effective January 1, 2026. Let's just imagine for a second what that would be like to end the federal war on drugs. Our drug war has caused a lot of problems around the planet. We could get the government out of the drug prohibition business, because it is big business. CNBC has reported that America spent over $1 trillion a year fighting the war on drugs over the last 50 years. And there are thousands of Americans who serve in this war. And especially overseas and in South America, where our drug control policy, we use it as sort of a blank check to interfere in the internal affairs of many nations, pressuring them to restrict the use of drugs, put sanctions on, put restrictions and things on what otherwise would be a commercial activity. And so imagine, and we did this in Afghanistan when we were there, tried to drive down the amount of poppy that was being grown in Afghanistan while we were there for 20 years. And it worked backwards. We spent millions and millions and I don't know how many millions and billions of dollars. But it actually had the effect of increasing the amount of poppy production, opium production in Afghanistan. It went absolutely backwards. And so there are a lot of dangerous conditions. There are drug cartels in Mexico that are only able to thrive because of the very high profits that are made through the illegal drug trade, just the same that Al Capone was able to thrive 100 years ago because of the very high profits that could be made from the illegal alcohol trade. And these drug cartels are not interested in establishing justice. They have killed thousands and thousands of Mexican citizens over the years. They killed many American citizens as well. There are a lot of innocent victims to the war on drugs. And again, drug use is not harmless, but the drug war causes far more harm than drug use. So another way to think about this is coming at this from supply and demand. We have tried through prohibition to drive down the supply of illegal drugs and make it so that they're not accessible. It hasn't worked. Illegal drugs are still available in prisons. When we say in prison. So in prison, where you are literally locked in, where the government, the state, whoever controls everything about your environment, you can still get drugs there. The war on drugs is a failure, as 2/3 of Americans, 85% of Americans agree that the war on drugs is a failure. 83%. 83% say that the war on drugs has failed. We recognize this, and Congress is failing to act. Congress won't even fix the issues with marijuana retailers selling, using the banking system. Like, Congress is totally behind the times. The average age there, I believe, this term is now over 65, and they've grown up on the drug war and can't see the only solution to this increasing number of overdose deaths is let's get tougher, and this time it'll work. No, this is the definition of insanity, to try the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So instead of focusing once again on the supply side of the drug problem, Instead, let's focus on the demand side. What makes people want to use drugs? And in many cases, it is self-medication, right? People are looking to numb themselves, looking to relieve some sort of stress in their lives. So the solution isn't necessarily, the solution is to make people's lives better, help people have happier, healthier, better lives, and drug use will be less appealing. That's the way that we can turn the war on drugs around, going after the demand side. But as long as people are still going to use drugs, simple harm reduction strategy is to help them do it in the healthiest way possible. Similar to needle exchanges, right? Needle exchanges drive down the external costs of drug use. If somebody's using a contaminated needle and ends up with HIV or hepatitis C or something like that, then the healthcare system has a bunch of extra costs added to it, whereas clean needles are much, much more affordable. Again, the war on drugs has really impacted communities of color, has destroyed so many families. Again, not to say that drug use hasn't destroyed families as well, but the war on drugs has done far more harm in breaking up families. So let's stop. Let's end the endless drug war. Let's end mass incarceration. And let's go after the demand side of the drug use by ending poverty. Poverty drives so many other problems, including one of the things that it does is pushes people in impoverished communities to find ways to make money. And one of the ways that they can make money is by selling drugs as a way to bring more dollars into their community. So we'll talk about unconditional basic income, the American Union Jobs Program. By putting everyone to work, being a better American, we can drive down the demand for drug sales in these communities, because we're going to put money into people's hands without unconditionally. All these things are interconnected. Again, that's why I wrote the novel. That's how you can see how they are interconnected. It's another aspect of the Fast for Peace. Again, the Fast for Peace on October 15th is to give up food and recreational intoxicants for 24 hours. Just drink water, drink all the water that you want. And as my own personal commitment to this moral crusade, to addressing Dr. King's triple evils, I am on day 7 of a 24-day fast. My weight today is down to 195 pounds, so about 10 pounds less than when I started last Saturday. I'm still feeling good, still keeping my electrolytes up, and yeah. But I'm asking you, I'm inviting you, if you want to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars, join me for 24 hours on my 24th day, October 15th. And together, we can claim the moral high ground. We can generate the moral pressure. We can seize the moral authority to make these changes to America's social contract. Candidates for Congress who are willing to accept this set of demands, immediate passage of the Trump-Biden peace plan, are invited to participate in the Fast for Peace as well and share that statement on Twitter, X. And this is how candidates for federal office compete for the American Union endorsement, incumbents and challengers. If the incumbent takes up this demand and achieves enactment of the Trump-Biden peace plan before the election, they are guaranteed the American Union endorsement. Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, but they have to get it done before the election. Now, if the incumbents refuse to take up the challenge, then the challengers have an opportunity. If they join us in our fast for peace, if they take up this demand for immediate passage, and the challenger and the incumbents fail to act, then those challengers will get the endorsement. You might be asking, all right, well, what happens if the challengers make this demand for immediate passage and the incumbents deliver? Well, then great. The challengers have gotten what they've asked for, and so they agree to support the American Union endorsement because the challengers have succeeded in helping us generate the moral pressure to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. And so this trickles up to the presidential election, where the presidential and vice presidential candidates are invited to lead the nation in a 24-hour fast for peace. There are additional conditions on Joe Biden and Donald Trump to make this peace plan work, including delivering 20% of their caucus's support in both chambers of the House, in both the House and the Senate, and for Donald Trump to pre-write a letter of resignation for January 20th. If he were to end up with the American Union endorsement, this would be their opportunity for both Donald Trump and Joe Biden to resign, to retire from politics, to turn things over to the younger generation. Because what more could you hope to accomplish after upgrading America's social contract by enacting the Trump-Biden peace plan? So Donald Trump and Joe Biden both would have to retire. J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris would have to agree to serve just one term in the as the president, opening things up for a competitive process in 2028 from both political parties. And I feel like I'm missing one thing. Oh, and then so how would the American Union endorsement be determined in this situation? And it would go to the political party who delivers the most votes for passage of the Trump-Biden peace plan in Congress, Republican or Democrat. Whoever gets the most members, political party members on board in Congress and gets their votes, can earn the Oval Office for their presidential candidate. This is how we can bring America together around a shared vision of ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, ending the endless wars, of establishing justice, ensuring domestic tranquility, providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. There's 101 different policies within the Trump-Biden peace plan. Nobody likes all 101. I don't like all 101, but I'm willing to compromise. That is what this fast demonstrates, is I'm willing to give something up. And that's an essential ingredient in compromise. And when we're all willing to give something up, the way that the framers did in 1787 when they drafted the Constitution, none of them liked everything in it either, but they recognized something had to be done. They recognized that America was worth saving. And America is still worth saving. We can do it in 2024 by coming together as a union of swing voters, refusing to take sides. Should only one political party, one presidential ticket cooperate in meeting those demands, and the other one refuses, then the cooperative candidate party will get the American Union endorsement. So if one does it, there's a huge incentive for the other to do it as well. And if neither one is willing to cooperate with the American Union, if neither one wants to go down in history as being accomplishing the most transformational, bringing the most transformational changes to the United States since the New Deal, then there will be a general strike in the ballot box. And the American Union endorsement for president will be determined by the closing of the Dow Jones Industrial Average on October 30th, 2024, 1 week before the general election. And if it closes on an odd number, if the ones digit is odd, then the endorsement will go to Donald Trump, granting his wish to be the 47th president of the United States. If it is an even number, it will go to Kamala Harris to make her the next president of the United States. Again, the presidential election race, control of Congress, is exceedingly close. A union of swing voters with a clear set of demands can take control, can seize control of Washington, D.C. They can use their power as the deciders to gain leverage over the whole political system and make it work for us, make it work for the marginalized millions. We can do this. We have the ability. We have the technology. All we need now is the shared will. And so please, there's three things that you can do to help. One is visit anamericanyunion.com and sign up to be a dues paying member by donating 25 cents a day, $7 a month to the PAC. 2, by helping break the polls by insisting to anyone who asks how you're going to vote for the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office that you are a true swing voter going to vote with the American Union on November 5th. And 3, by joining the Fast for Peace on October 15th. All right, so once again, I'm giving away a copy of my novel. I'll send you an autographed copy. If you're here in the United States, you've got until 8 o'clock tonight to Eastern time, so another 5-6 minutes, to go to anamericanyunion.com and sign up for the email list. What if you're already on our email list? That's okay. Sign up again. I'll pick one random winner from anyone who signs up during the live stream tonight. All right. I think that's probably about it. Tomorrow we are going to get into prison reform, the Matthew Charles Prison Reform Act. And so we're going to talk about some of the pieces. We'll talk about the Second Look Act, which would allow federal prisoners to request a sentence review after serving more than 10 years of incarceration. We're going to talk about repealing the Prison Litigation Reform Act, which creates a 2-tiered system of justice for incarcerated people. That restricts their access to the judicial system, and so that would be repealed. Repealing the restrictions on Pell Grants for incarcerated Americans, education being a proven method of reducing recidivism. Repealing incarceration incentive grants to states, having the Bureau of Prisons provide identification to people leaving incarceration. Again, helping make the 97% of incarcerated people are scheduled to be released. And so it is in everyone's best interest to make that process as smooth as possible. And so by making sure that people have identification documents, that way we're not putting unnecessary speed bumps in their path. There's also, we're going to talk about a couple of the Supreme Court decisions that made it harder for people incarcerated to get habeas hearings. And we're going to address prison gerrymandering, phase out private prisons, and address the restrictions on the use of solitary confinement. So lots of good prison reforms that we're going to get to tomorrow. It'll be a full hour. Please join me again from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Are we Standard Time? Daylight Time. Eastern Daylight Time. As we review these things and talk more about the harms that is caused by our prison, the dehumanizing prison system that we have, that does not in many cases look to rehabilitate, to re-educate, but simply to warehouse human beings. That really is the stain of mass incarceration, and we can end it. We have the ability. I hope you help me gather the moral authority to do so. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody who tuned in. You got 3 minutes left to enter the drawing for the free copy of the novel. Thanks. Have a great evening.